the Biden DOJ is now suing Apple. Now, let me just tell you something about Apple. There are not that many people who hate Apple. There just aren't. I mean, about 70% of Americans own an iPhone. Most Americans are pretty happy with their iPhone. You know how you know? Because they're paying more for their iPhone than they're paying for an Android. They like the iPhone because it is an extremely user-friendly product. They like Apple's products, their computers, their AirPods, the iPads. They like all of those things because they're incredibly effective and user-friendly. So naturally, the Biden DOJ is now going after Apple. What is the constituency for this? Who are the people who are like, oh man, I'm so glad they're finally going to make Apple less effective and break it up and make it work worse. What I really need is for the government to step in and break up Apple so that my iPhone doesn't work as well as it does right now. The entire argument, by the way, between Apple and, for example, Microsoft is that Steve Jobs wanted Apple to build closed systems. Microsoft is an open system, meaning that Microsoft can be uploaded on Android. It can be used with a variety of technologies. And this was a big ideological debate between Steve Jobs, who wanted everything self-contained. So when you opened the phone, everything was kind of working within a system, and Bill Gates, who wanted everything to be much more open on an ideological level. And there are good arguments on both sides. But the idea that Apple presents an actual monopolistic problem in a market where they control maybe 60-65% of the market, on a statistical level, that's absolutely not a monopoly. And when it comes to the idea that this is bad for consumers, you're going to have to make the case that it's really, really bad for consumers when consumers continue to consume the product at extraordinarily high rates and be happy with the product. What this really is an attempt to gain headlines with the upper crust white liberals who really hate Apple or something. Like, I just don't know who's the constituency for this. It's bad as a matter of antitrust law, but how many people actually care about antitrust law? Does he think that blue-collar workers like, man, I'm so glad they're going to break up Apple now. Blue-collar workers aren't going to vote for Joe Biden because his DOJ is going after Apple. Here's Meritt Garland slamming Apple yesterday for some of the dumbest possible reasons.
And as any iPhone user who has ever seen a green text message or received a tiny, grainy video can attest, Apple's anti-competitive conduct also includes making it more difficult for iPhone users to message with users of non-Apple products. It does this by diminishing the functionality of its own messaging app and by diminishing the functionality of third-party messaging apps. By doing so, Apple knowingly and deliberately degrades quality, privacy, and security for its users. For example, if an iPhone user messages a non-iPhone user in Apple Messages, the text appears not only as a green bubble, but incorporates limited functionality. The conversation is not encrypted, videos are pixelated and grainy, and users cannot edit messages or see typing indicators. As a result, iPhone users perceive rival smartphones as being lower quality because the experience of messaging friends and family who do not own iPhones is worse.
Wait, so you mean that Apple doesn't want to subsidize Android? That's what he's saying right there. He's saying Apple doesn't want to do cryptography for messages with Android. And if Android wants to upgrade its own abilities, then it should upgrade its own abilities. Is that a monopoly problem? Yeah, like, who's the crowd for this? This is like the big headline. So what happened? Apple stock gets hit. You know how much Apple stock is being held by 401ks right now? By teacher pension funds? A lot. The answer is a lot. But these are the kind of... Joe Biden is just appealing to this very small cadre of people who are so in their own heads and, frankly, up their own colons, that they don't even know what the American people want anymore. It's truly an amazing thing. April 7th marks 6 months since Hamas brutally attacked Israel, launching a vicious war for Israel's survival. We're living in times we never thought we would see. As Israel fights for their existence, many people around the world have turned their backs on the Israeli people right when they need them most. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground right now, delivering critically needed emergency supplies to those who are suffering. There's an immediate need for essentials like food, medicine, and emergency supplies for hundreds of thousands of Jews in Israel. Many cannot return to their homes because of the rocket fire in the north from Hezbollah. Israel is in desperate need. That's why I'm partnering with the fellowship today. Every donation is urgently needed. It's a matter of life and death for a lot of men, women, and children who are displaced because their homes were destroyed in the south, and many who are displaced in the north right now. Many families are still torn apart, have loved ones being held hostage. Many have loved ones who are still fighting in the military. The fight is not over. The Israeli people are still suffering. Your gift to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews will show them they are not forgotten. To give to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, visit benforthefellowship.org. That's benforthefellowship.org. God bless and thank you. Apparently, Biden thinks that he's going to be able to escape the impact of his terrible presidency with cash. So Joe Biden right now has a monster cash advantage over Donald Trump in terms of the presidential race. According to Axios, his presidential campaign committee has $71 million on hand compared to Trump's $33.5 million. The DNC has $27 million on hand compared to the RNC's $11 million. And so that massive funding advantage he thinks is going to translate to victory. So I have a theory. The theory is that money is not going to matter all that much in this election. The reason I say that is because money is no longer a proxy for victory in elections. Money can help you marginally, but it's not as though there's no name recognition for Donald Trump. If this were, for example, Joe Biden dumping hundreds of millions of dollars on, say, Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, then you could say that the money might have an effect. But everyone knows what they think of Trump already, and everybody knows what they think of Biden already. The people in the middle are just going to have to make a call, which is, was I better off in 2019? I'm skipping 2020 because it's nobody's fault what happens during a pandemic. It is your fault if you continue to blow out the money after the pandemic in 2021. But in any case, were you better off in 2019 or are you better off in 2024? Meanwhile, Joe Biden, like this snide kind of insanity where the stupidest legal case I've ever seen. Like there are a bunch of legal cases against Donald Trump. And I've been honest with you about which ones are stronger and which ones are weaker. By far the strongest case against Donald Trump is the classified documents case from Mar-a-Lago in Florida. That is the strongest case against Donald Trump. Now, is that a politically motivated case? Of course, it's a politically motivated case. Joe Biden was keeping classified documents in his car, everywhere else for dozens of years. With that said, the case against Trump, legally speaking, is strongest there. But the single weakest case against Donald Trump is the civil fraud case brought by Letitia James against Donald Trump in the state of New York, where they are currently holding him up at gunpoint for almost $500 million. And the goal of this is to bankrupt Trump, and apparently to allow Joe Biden to talk about bankrupting Trump. Well, it looks to me as though you have an administration and its allies that are targeting the political opponent of that administration and trying to personally bankrupt him by charging him hundreds of millions of dollars in order to convict him civilly of something you couldn't do criminally. They couldn't charge him with criminal fraud because they couldn't meet the burden. So they went to civil fraud, which is a preponderance of the evidence standard. And then they fined him $500 million based on loans that he took that he repaid, which is totally crazy. But you still have Joe Biden, who's joking about Trump being in debt because of this. Does this look like a winning strategy to you? Because when Donald Trump says they are trying to stop me by using every means, they will throw the kitchen sink at me, he's not wrong. He happens to be right. And the more Joe Biden says stuff like this, the more sympathetic Trump becomes. And it's not just Joe Biden, it's all of his allies. You have Jimmy Kimmel joking about Donald Trump's wealth. Here is Jimmy Kimmel making fun of Donald Trump. Now, again, they are fining him $500 million for not really doing anything that damaged anyone. But Jimmy Kimmel is going to mock Trump now about that.
The great white supremacist has until Monday to come up with a $464 million bond, or the state may seize and sell his property. Trump said nobody has ever heard of anything like this before. Trump needs cash, and we never heard of most of the crazy stuff you do before, but I mean, nobody ever heard of the president changing the weather with a Sharpie before either. Something tells me over the weekend Trump's going to start talking about how strong Vladimir Putin is, and suddenly a dump truck full of rubles will pull up and cover this for him. But of course, the real loser here is Melania. She may end up with half of the nothing he owns now. I hope she got an advance on that prenup, because if you think she hates him now, wait until he's poor. That's going to... But his
I'm sorry, this is such
say,
obnoxious garbage. So first of all, the notion that Russia paid off Trump is so stupid and discredited, but they're still trafficking in this. Remember, Donald Trump is fake news and untrustworthy, but they will still have Jimmy Kimmel years later suggesting that Vladimir Putin paid off Donald Trump for some unspecified reason. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.